Okay, so today what we're doing is we are we are making an intake for the Predator 212cc motor. This is just for the hell of it, basically. I wanted to make an intake that'll take like a regular 39 40 millimeter like scooter kind of air filter, and this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make it right now, and I'm gonna take you through the process of building it in Autodesk 123 Design, and then we will do a test fitting. This is part one of probably two parts. The second part, I'm making modifications to this design that you see here. I'm doing the sound after the fact, so you're gonna get taken along on the ride here. So let's get to it. So first I want you to go and we are going to make a cylinder. Also, just so you know, this design will be available once it's complete. It's going to look a little different than this one because I didn't like this one 100%. We'll talk about that at the end. So this cylinder, I had some measurements in mind. I checked everything out beforehand, measured everything. So I made it 80 millimeters tall, and I need to make the two side pieces. So here you're going to see, this is the first one. And I believe I make it four, a 4 radius, so it's 8 millimeters wide, and there's going to end up being 2 of these. But what I need to do is line it up first with the center button here. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to line it up right now. None of this is perfect. It'll work fine for the final design because there's a little bit of leeway room in here. So if you notice that things are slightly off, it's because I don't care. Like I said, there is a little bit of wiggle room. Okay, so what I do is I go to the bottom, and then I need to measure. So I'm going to click on one side and then the other side, and then we find out it's 5.4 and change. So what we need to do is this piece needs to be 3 millimeters away from the other piece. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those two, I'm going to take the one, I'm going to move it back by 2.436 just to even it out. So that way it's exactly 3 millimeters away. On the other side, it ends up being like 3.001 millimeters away or something like that. Not a big deal. You wouldn't even notice it in the final build. So this is me just trying to make sure I can count to 3. 1, 2, 3. So that's that. Now we'll move on to the rest. Okay, so now what I need to do is build the outside cylinder. So to do that, we are going to make it, I made it the full size of this. So that's 40 millimeters wide, 20 millimeter radius, and I did 80 high. In the end, we're going to find out that this is a little big on the sides, so you'll see I'm going to need to modify this in the end. So now I'm just measuring it to make sure that I got it, generally speaking, in the center, because it doesn't want to lock for me. Like I said in the last video, I'm not an expert on this at all. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the subtract tool to remove the centerpiece. All of these first pieces we made are pieces that are going to be subtracted from other items once we get to there. They were really just put there for measurement purposes and to know where we're going in the final design. I basically make this up as I go. I know, generally speaking, the shape I need, but I don't know exactly how I'm getting there. So what I'm doing is this piece is a piece that I'm taking out, and I modify this slightly and unnecessarily further in. I make it a little bit bigger than this. It actually needs to be a hair smaller. So what I'm doing is I'm just cutting out this piece. It's because the carburetor has a little bit of overhang in this area where you need some air to be able to go through it. So I can't remember which side it's on, so I'm adding it to both sides here because it's not going to change anything. And then what we're going to do is we'll build up the sides of that a little bit later on. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're going to make the side pieces that that are going to have the holes in it where it actually attaches to the carburetor. So I make a cube here. I just pick some random size. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to modify it in a minute anyway. So there's the cube, and we're going to move it in so we can see what it looks like and how I need to modify it. So I'm bringing it right up to the edge. So what this cube is going to be is it's going to be the actual support part for one of the two bolts that goes into the carburetor. So now I'm just checking it out and deciding how I want to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, I'm going to shrink it down. So I'm pressing and pulling. That's so I can get it to the exact size of that other piece, because that other piece I believe was 15 millimeters high, and that's what I wanted to do here. It ends up being a little bit big. About 10 millimeters is probably all you need for this. So if you decide you want to make your own and use this as an example, do 10 millimeters. Like I said, the final file will be available on a download link in the description when this is all done, but it'll probably be on part 2. It may not be on part 1. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I duplicate this object and I pull it back over and put it in place on the other side. So the positioning is not going to be perfect, so what I do is I measure a couple times and then move it to the place I want it. I think it ends up being a hair off. No big deal. Like I said, the hole just needs to be in the correct place. And by correct place, I mean it could be a hair off one way or another. Doesn't have to be perfect. In the end, what you're doing is you're sealing the carburetor, so you just need enough edging to push against it. So from here, what I'm going to do is I am going to move it slightly, see if I like the positioning. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I am cutting these two pieces out from the main piece. So I duplicate the circle part, and then I use that to subtract from the other two pieces. Then I delete the inside pieces, and I have my general piece that I want on the outside. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to start using the, I think it's the polyline tool, and we're going to cut those pieces down to make them look like sort of like a V shape, something along those lines, because that's the shape I want. So I select the first corner, I then select the next corner. You don't have to actually go in between the two. I do that by accident here. And then I select the other corner, and then basically you need to select the other two corners. So you go boom to the one corner, boom to the next corner. You really only need to do the two triangles on their own. And then what you do from there, make sure that they're covering the piece completely, and then you extrude them downwards. And as it extrudes down, it just takes out those pieces. Okay, so now we're going to do an up-close view of this. So select your first corner with the polyline tool, then select where you want it to go. Like I said, these are not going to be exactly the same on both sides. They're going to be close. So then select your other 2 points, and there's your triangle. Then do the same thing again, because we're basically cutting this out. I clicked off of the tool by accident, so I had to go back, and I can't find it. So now you click again, first point, and the first click is usually to click that piece, that plane, basically. So then pick your first point. Like I said, mine is generalized, doesn't need to be perfect for what I'm doing. So then pick your second point, and then pick your third point. You can go over if you want. It's not a big deal for this because you're cutting these pieces out anyway. So they're just, you know, a generalized design. So once you do that, you can then extrude straight down, and there you go. There you have it. And then I delete the last 2 pieces here. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm making a little rectangle. And with that rectangle, you'll see in a second, I'm going to be extruding out some of the main body of this. So what I do is I pick the 4 points, and then it makes this little tiny see-through transparent rectangle. And the points don't have to be perfect. Once again, you can modify this just by clicking on a line and dragging it over. So once I get the line I like, I then move it all the way up to the top and then extrude down. If you notice, I go too far down, it turns into a solid piece because it's duplicating that piece that's at the bottom and turning it into a solid piece. I don't want a solid piece. I want it to suck this out, so to speak. So it becomes just one indent in it, more or less. And by doing that, I can then adjust the thickness of that wall. So what I do here is I then move this to the opposite side, make sure I get the correct positioning by moving it all the way down to the bottom. And as you can see, I just got it to the other side. So now I'm going to redo my view because it's too close. And I'm going to move this all the way to the bottom. So once I bring it to the bottom, I can then see, oh, it's off by a little bit. So I need to move it over a hair, and that's good. And now I can go bring it back up. And what I need to do is I need to make sure it's 11 millimeters off the top for the current design that I have. So I'm going to move this back up. If I can get my positioning right, I'm just checking it out to make sure I like it. And then I'm going to press and pull this in just because I was thinking about it going, I don't have enough room there. It ends up being not enough room at all. So in the final print of this design that we're making right here, this needs to be modified in the next one. So in part 2, I'll modify this and make this slightly different. And I think I'm going to print it solid next time. So there's nothing to worry about. So as you can see here, I messed up. So Control-Z, bring it back. So I just want to select this and move it up. So it's hard to click when you got so many pieces on top of each other. So once I get it, I'm going to move it, and then I can move it up to where I want it to be. So once I got it up where I want it to be, I can then do the exact same thing I did on this side and cut it out. And then I just want to delete this little piece, and we can move on to the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to make the holes that mount it on the engine itself. So I'm going to extrude through, as you saw there, and then I'm going to make this one piece. So I use the combine tool to make it one piece. And now we're going to do the other side, same thing. I'm going to extrude up through, and then I'm going to use the combine tool one more time and make this one piece. So there you go. I'm extruding up, and now I click on the one piece. Well, actually, click the merge tool, then click on one piece, then the other, and then hit enter, and then they become one piece. Okay, so now you can see we have the general form here, but we need to extend the edges a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I use 2 round pieces. So I'm just going to make this, pull it in, I'm going to duplicate it, and this is literally just to add a little bit of bulk to the plastic so it's not so thin in that corner. So I copy it, and then I paste it. And then I am going to merge the 2 pieces together so that way it's easier to cut these pieces down. So click on one, then click on the other, hit enter after you hit the merge tool. And now I'm going to take a duplicate of the main piece, and then what I did was I did the subtract tool, and it turned into this. So you got these couple little extra pieces now that just add some bulk to the edges there, and they don't get in the way or anything. They'll be in the final product once we do our little bit of editing. Now I'm taking those pieces and I am deleting everything now. What I was actually trying to do was combine them. I clicked the wrong tool. I hit the subtract tool. So once you combine them, there you go. Now they're all solid, one piece together. So from here, what I'm going to do is I am going to press and pull these a little bit. This I shouldn't have done. This piece should have stayed where it was. I'm probably going to actually make it a little bit thicker in that area too, in the new one that I'm doing, but that's for tomorrow. And everything else here was fine for the most part. It was just a little thick on the where the screws go through the bolts, and I need a little more depth on the other side of the bolt. So what I'm doing now is on the gas tank there is vent hose on the Predator engines. On the Subaru one that I'm going to show you later, because the Predator engine's in the shed, there is no vent. So technically this fits the Subaru engine too. I think that's a 169cc engine, but the Subaru engine doesn't have this vent, so you would have to take it off, close it off, whatever you want to do. I may make a second copy of this in the final form and close off the vent hole and just use that as, you know, if your engine doesn't have it or you deleted it, because it's not necessary. It's an emissions thing, I think, to make it more efficient. But it burns off the fumes, I guess. So all I'm doing here is I make a cylinder that goes through, and this is the outside cylinder. And then I need to just center it. And I decided to bring it in close. It actually could go a little bit closer than this, and I may move it down in the final iteration of this, because there's no need for it to be any further out, I don't think. So I may make it a little closer in, and what I'm doing next is I'm making the second cylinder, and this is to literally just make the hole through the center. I was going to make this a little bit wider, but I wanted the walls of this to be thick. So I decided to go slightly smaller so it'd have a thick wall, and I think it's plenty big enough for the tube that gets attached to it. So now I'm going to extrude that straight through, and then you can see, boom, there's a hole that goes directly through. And now I'm going to push the little piece that's sticking out in, because it doesn't need to be sticking out. We just want it to be flush. And then the next thing I do is, I don't think this is going to be strong enough on its own, so I make another cylinder. Right in here, I make another cylinder, and I put that down on the bottom edge, because I just wanted a little more bulk on the bottom, so that way it was stronger, because you don't want it snapping off. So just things to make the 3D print better, basically. So what I do here is I put it, generally speaking, and then I'm going to move it. Well, I'm going to throw it a million miles away. Now I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to use the move tool now, and I'm going to move it so it's straight on. So I have to do some minor adjustments here to get it to exactly where I want it. You can see it's still off a little bit, and that's way off, so I do 0.5, I believe, and then 0.4, and that's good enough for me. So now what I have to do is I have to cut through this and delete the little centerpiece that's there. So I decide that I wanted a little more space so that the tube can be pushed down to it and be flush on it, so I bring it back a little bit, and I'm going to just make it smaller on this end. But I believe, yep, we're going to press and pull this end, make it flat against it, just like the other one. And now we are going to use the subtract tool. So we click the one we want and the other one, and then I go, oops. It's exactly what I wanted to do, but I needed to duplicate it first. So I duplicate it. And there you see, there's a second one, and then I'm going to subtract again. What this is going to do is subtract it, and it'll leave the original one, so that I have the tube that goes through. Then you delete that, the little centerpiece that would block the hole, and you then go in, and I'm just checking to make sure that I actually deleted the center hole, because I couldn't really tell. I wanted to make sure it was a through hole, so I'm zooming in as close as I can, so I can see through, which is really hard to do when you get really close to these. So, all right. So now I know it's a through hole, and there's the design. So there's one more thing that I needed to do here, and that is I needed to make a little bit more room for the nuts that are going to go through here. So what I did is I made these two little cylinders, and you'll see I'm making one here, and I'm just adjusting it around. I end up copying, pasting it, making another one. So once I take those two, I'm going to move them upwards. I do that in just a minute. I'm just trying to get the spacing correct, because I didn't want it too close to that edge because it's thin. So now that I got them where I want it, I'm just double checking everything, and I like it. So what I'm going to do is select both of them. And I lost the other one, so select the other one. And I'm going to move them upwards right onto the top edge. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract them, not merge, subtract. So click off everything. And I'm just looking to make sure that they were correct in placement. And I like the height. And what I decided here was to bring them up a little higher, because it depends on the engine, but sometimes the studs are out a little further. So I decided, let's make it a little longer. And like I said, the mistake here is there isn't enough depth here. So I'm going to have to probably make the inside a hair smaller, just because I have to take out a little bit more here so that the nuts fit properly, but not that much. So we'll see. I mean, I was off by probably like 2 or 3 millimeters. So we'll see if we can take that out without hurting the final design. So there it is. I just subtracted those once I liked the positioning. And now we're going to move on to test fitting this. So I 3D printed it. I didn't think there was any need to show it. Here we go. So this isn't my Predator motor, this is my Subaru motor, but I am using this as a test subject because this one's handy. Looks like it's pretty much the same carburetor. The Predator is in the shed and I'm too lazy to go get it right now because this is just test fitting. And I don't actually have I thought it was just the same, but it's not. This one has a clipboard. I don't have the air filter that's going on this, so not likely to put it on there until I have that. Alright, so this all looks generally the same. The Predator has a tube that comes down. Interesting. The Predator has a tube that comes off the gas tank too. That's the only difference here. So, very crudded up around this. Very, very crudded up. Yeah, this thing needs to be just taken apart to be cleaned up. Whatever. Not worried about it right now. So, I think this design is going to have to be, actually, it's not too bad. So, the gist of it is your little cone air filter goes on here. My design is a little small a little long for what needs to be. It could be cut down a little bit. I'm going to actually leave the gasket off, I think. Let's see. Pretty sure I'm just going to plug this off. The other option is you could vent this in here too, but this vent is actually for the gas tank. So I'm going to see if this actually works. Yeah, design needs to be modified a little bit. It will probably work for what we're doing here, but these sides could be a little skinnier. So, 2 things to fix, which will be the next one, which is going to be printed better than this one, because this one had some issues printing on the inside. Probably going to do a solid infill on the next one, and you can see I figured out what was going on at the top. The top, it's really well printed. Throughout the other parts, it's got some issues. I was just messing with the printer trying to figure it all out. So the gist of it is I think I'm going to take the design, cut it down a little bit, and I'm going to shrink this down. This doesn't need to be as tall, because this is super freaking solid. You're not going to break that. What else? This little ridge right here needs to come down a hair. Pretty sure I have this gasket. Yeah, I have this gasket on wrong. I'm not paying attention. Goes like that. And let's see, what else? A little vent tube is probably fine. Super solid with the way it's printed. This guy has to come down. The whole thing should be shrunk down a little bit. These walls are going to go in a little bit. I'm thinking about cutting back a little bit on the sides as well. If I'm going to do a solid infill anyway on the final one, it doesn't need to be quite as thick. So that's the plan. I'm going to leave the tip the same size because that's the size of the filter, and I'm going to modify the rest of this to fit correctly, let's say. So that's the plan for another day. So I think this is going to be a video of its own. For now, I'm just going to leave it at that. So next video will be the finishing of this and the adjustment of the design and the print, which is actually going to make it a faster print because it'll be smaller. Because I think I am only going to make it, I'm going to take off like this much probably, at least that much. So it can be nice and short, just to have enough room to put the filter on and clamp it down. So I could even move this down a hair, because that was I didn't know if it was going to get in the way of anything. And it's not in its correct position. So the new one is going to be slightly different from this, we'll say that. I'm going to move this down and modify the design a little bit to make sure it works on here fine. So, see you in the next one.